Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, now part of the Bleav network. And joining me as co-host Stephen Kerr, 65 plus years in sports journalism. Between the two of us, along with me and Stephen, is Tom Chavarria from the Bourbon and Baseball podcast covering the Astros and the Bullpen podcast covering the Texans. He's got it all covered over there, and I'm excited to welcome aboard as Tom is going to be a part of our team now. He'll join me on Texans Live postgame shows this season. And Tom, we're just 2 days away from our first one. You ready? You ready?
Gentlemen, I cannot wait. The Texans season can't get here fast enough. Yeah. You see everything they did in the offseason. You see everything in training camp, and I just need it on the field. I need it right now.
Tom, I have a quick question for you. I need to check out your podcast, but I'm just curious. Do you always have bourbon on hand when you're doing it?
You know, it's over my shoulder, over that shoulder. I try to mix it up. It's not always bourbon, but we do have a bourbon that we'll go to. I'm currently working through a bottle by Ryan Bingham, the singer. I don't know if y'all watch Yellowstone. He has his own bourbon. So I've been trying that. It's pretty good. I would suggest it to you if you get a chance to check it out at Specs.
All right. I was just checking to make sure.
Yeah, there's no crawfish boxes bourbon. Yeah, is there?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not false advertising, I promise.
All right. Well, I don't want to get the Astros fans up because we're going to get to them. We're going to see what's going on with them in just a second. Trust me, we've got some things really to talk about with Dana Brown's trade deadline moves. But let's start with this shocking Denico Autry 6-game suspension. Tom and Stephen, Denico's saying this was a compounding pharmacy foul-up, but he's not going to be able to prove enough to get this thing budged a little bit. And it just sucks for what looked like the deepest position on the Texans, Tom.
Yeah, it's a big blow. I mean, that was a guy that they brought in. You really felt excited about what he could do for this defensive front. Now you kind of scramble a little bit to try to fill that void because while, like you spoke to, it is a deep position, you were counting on him to, I think, move around a little bit, right?
Yeah, he's going to play some tackle and especially on passing down. And it was going to be fun. I mean, we were going to have potentially 3 elite pass rushers on defense on third downs or, long passing yards, second long, stuff like that. And the other thing that you miss is, you don't have the depth maybe that you had last year at tackle position. Otherwise, the defensive tackle, there's some guys that we don't know what they're going to be yet. You lost a couple of guys and we're still trying to figure out, well, who's going to be around. So that's the real trick of this whole thing.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, every time I see this kind of thing, guys, if you're going to a pharmacy and all, I don't know how you can get a list of ingredients of what medicines you're taking beforehand and try to figure it out. But it's just a mess all the way around. And I know, names are being tossed about. What's the guy's name? Edwards, Jerry Hughes, I think, but
JJ Watt.
JJ Watt, come out of retirement, JJ, at least, for 6 games, surely you can give us something. But yeah, I was really looking forward to seeing Denico in there and what they could do, especially with, the number of sacks he's had over the years.
Yeah, let's flip it over to the Texans and Bears in the Hall of Fame game. And Tom, what or who are you most focusing your attention on for Thursday?
To me, it seems like cornerback, right? That's the big elephant in the room. You looked at the depth chart, Kamari Lassiter listed as CB2 on Twitter. That has been the talk of a lot of different talking personalities. Who's going to be CB2? Obviously, Stingley being the guy on the other side. And now him being listed as a starter, do we see him on Thursday? Do they just go straight to CJ Henderson and Jeff Okudah? I really feel like that's going to be an interesting point.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. I had cornerback on my list, but in a different sort of way, because I feel like we have a little kind of cool Gabe inside the game story with Caleb Williams versus both Kamari Lassiter and Kalen Bullock, your 2 rookie secondary players. And, I say game inside the game, Caleb Williams and Kalen Bullock, yeah, they sort of know each other. They were teammates a few months ago. So that matchup is kind of fun, Stephen.
Yeah, that's right. That would be interesting. And I'm going to go completely off base here. I'm going to go quarterback. And I know you're going, wait, what? Quarterback? You know CJ is going to be the quarterback. Well, of course you do. But it's my understanding that he's not going to play in the game. So what I have been wondering is, last year when CJ went down, and heaven forbid that he goes down this year, he did limp off the field, I think, on Saturday with a foot thing, but came back on. But I want to see what Davis Mills is made of. Is he going to start this game, going to play at least half of it? Maybe see Case Keenum and some of these other guys that aren't going to make the club, come in there. But I want to know if Davis Mills is the guy they're going to trot out during the regular season. Should CJ go down, hopefully he won't. But I think this is where you need to see what Davis Mills is made of.
I feel like we know what Davis Mills is made of, Tom. I mean, I've seen it all. I know it all. This guy cannot hit.
Well, not around
anything.
this offense, though. I mean, you put him in this offense, and maybe they can prop him up a little bit. Who knows? But
I know a little bit in the Browns game last year, we saw it, and I wasn't really thrilled with it. It's the same. It seemed like the same old Davis Mills. I don't know.
So I don't know if you guys saw it, but I saw earlier today that the Bears have already came out and said that Caleb Williams will not play. That Tyson Badgett.
Oh, yeah, I screwed up then. You screwed up my story. Now I've got to come up with an. I'm sorry. I was so focused on the Astros on Twitter the last few hours that I'm like, oh, I missed it.
I guess I don't know what you're going to get from the Bears. We're really going to have to look to week 2 to really get an idea of what that matchup will look like, because it'll be for real then.
You figure that they've got to start their rookie. I mean, why wouldn't you want to get him as many snaps as possible? He's trying to get himself settled. That shocks me a little bit that they don't want to start. I mean, I get trying to keep guys healthy, but I mean, he's playing his first season, so he needs reps. You want to see what he's got. That's weird.
It could be the fact that you are playing that extra game, because if they're in the Hall of Fame game, they're actually going to get to play 4 games. So maybe if they were only going to play 3, perhaps that would have changed the setting. I don't know, but you would think you'd at least play a couple of possessions, wouldn't you?
It used to be 4 games. All of a sudden, we're allergic to 4 games because we haven't had 4 games in 100 years. Oh, wait. No, that was just
a couple years, right?
Yeah. Wasn't that long ago. Yeah. I don't get it. But, it kind of also makes it a little bit more dull from the other side of the ball. It's just, the Bears not playing their guy. We knew Stroud wouldn't play. So, I mean, Tom, we're going to be talking a lot about the Texans rookies. I guess that's going to be the storyline. We talked about a couple of them so far, but that's really, those guys, I assume, are all going to play. Hopefully, at least we'll get to see all the rookies.
Yeah, I feel like you're going to get Kalen Bullock, like you spoke to earlier. I think we're going to get to see Jawar Jordan, who's flashed a little bit during camp. I thought it was really interesting that they had him listed as a running back 4 in front of Cam Akers. I get it. He just came onto the team. But for me, I have a hard time believing he signed up to be behind Daria Bungawale and Jawar Jordan on the depth chart to try to win a job in camp.
Does anybody get caught up in the depth chart, or is it just me? I think it's all a fake. It's like a fake deal to throw out there to throw everybody off about, what they really think of guys. Because we know how it goes. The rookies are always at the back of the depth chart.
Yeah.
And then, magically, we kind of thought you drafted that guy high and he was going to play a little bit more and maybe he was going to be first or second string. And so, I just kind of throw all that crap away.
Well, and it's going to change from week to week too, especially with injuries and, ineffectiveness. I've never been one to place a whole lot of, substance in the depth chart, especially this early in the preseason. It's just too early to tell. But one of the things I always enjoy, what few things I enjoy about the preseason anymore is who is going to be the surprise of camp. And sometimes it's an unrestricted free agent or a middle round draft choice that you don't really think of him on the radar, and they actually light it up and they may end up making the team. So that's what I always look for every year, especially in the first couple of games.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some of the surprises over the years with the Texans. There's a couple of guys that I remember. There was a wide receiver. I'm blanking on his name right now, but he flashed all through camp, and then I don't even think he made the team. So it's just one of those, guys that, he looks good, but sometimes those guys flash, sometimes they don't. I don't know.
Exactly.
What's the over under, Tom, on Andre Johnson's Hall of Fame speech? Is it 5 minutes? Like, what are you giving Andre? I just can't imagine Andre saying anything more. Thanks everybody. Really appreciate it. Glad to be a Hall of Famer. Bye.
Whatever it is, I got to take the over because he's last, right? He's going last. So I feel like it's probably going to have a little bit more pageantry to it. I think Gary Kubiak is giving him the speech or whatever. I think he's a bit of a talker. So I really feel like it's probably going to be longer than it would be if it was just Andre getting up there, right? I don't think he would get up there and thank 1,000 people. He would probably be really short and brief, and that would be the end of it.
Yeah, I've been hearing Andre on some podcasts lately, and you wouldn't think he never was much of a talker as a player. I just wonder if Cortland Finnegan's name's going to be mentioned during his speech. You guys think that? What's the over/under on him mentioning him? Probably 0.
One Texan that we're going to hear from a bunch prior to Andre's speech is Mark Vandermeer. Think about this for a second. In that video introduction before the speech, it'll be all Vandermeer since he's called Dre's games the Texans and the Hurricanes.
It might actually be longer than Andre's speech then.
Yeah, it could be. We could hear more Vandermeer than Andre. I don't know, but I actually asked him about that years ago when he was on with us. And in case you missed it, look for that YouTube link on our Andre Johnson tribute at the end of the show to hear Vandy's reaction, because that's in the air. You're going to hear some fun stories from several of Andre's teammates that we've compiled from all of our interviews over the years. So definitely look for that. If you're up on YouTube, just go to the end of the YouTube video if you're listening on the audio side, and we'll hit the Astros shortly. But quick YouTube reminder as well. Tell us what you want to see on Thursday from the Texans. And if nothing else, always click the thumbs up to support our content. If you were on vacation last week, go back and watch our tribute to Rockets radio legend Gene Peterson, who passed away. We talked to ex-Rockets broadcaster Greg Lucas and classic Rockets beat writer, old school Robert Falkoff, author of a couple of Rockets books. It's great listening. You'll want to go back and hear that. All right, guys, social media Astro fan hated Kikuchi for Will Wagner, Jake Loss, and Joey Loperfido. Steven, I'm going to let you go first. Are you ready to give it the Bill O'Brien stamp of disapproval?
Well, all right, here's the deal. I mean, obviously, if Kikuchi comes out, does the job, and the Astros win the World Series, nobody's going to care. If he doesn't, then we're going to spend all offseason firing verbal bullets at Dana Brown, Jim Crane, whomever, just like we did with Jose Abreu, Rafael Montero, et cetera, et cetera. I personally thought it was a little much to give up, but if you take a look at the guys they did give up. All right, Jake Bloss, they drafted him last year. Yeah, he hasn't looked that great, but look, the guy's hardly had any minor league experience. They rushed him to the majors. So he's still got some developing to do. I still think he has some upside, but how effective was he going to be for the Astros now? Joey Loperfido, yeah, he certainly, I think a lot of us kind of penciled him as being an outfielder of the future. But the Astros have a glut of outfielders. In fact, they called up Pedro Leon, which, I'm assuming he's taking Loperfido's spot on the roster. So you've got some guys that can come in, and Loperfido was showing flashes, but his strikeout rate was still a little bit higher than I think you'd like it to be. Defensively, he was certainly doing the job. And Will Wagner, that was probably the biggest surprise for me. But again, you're talking about a guy that he's unproven yet. He's Billy Wagner's son. There's a lot of sentiment there. So, while I think they did give up a bit much, especially when you consider the Dodgers traded for Jack Flaherty, and they gave up their number 3 and number 28 prospects, and that's it for a rental. And for a rental, yeah, I'd say the Astros probably gave up a little too much for Kikuchi, but, let's just see how it plays out the rest of the season so far.
I absolutely hated this trade. This was the worst to overpay. This was the worst guy you probably could have got. While you do make valid points about all the players discussed, I just can't help but think how young. We're talking about a 23-year-old Jake Bloss, who was the 99th pick in last year's draft. Probably needed more seasoning because he skipped all of AAA. Definitely had upside, definitely had potential. He was phenomenal in AA. Pitched a no-hitter. Like, that's not something that just happens every day for all the other starters that come out of college. Joey Loperfido just feels like a stud. I feel like when you looked at him, you saw a lot of what George Springer looked like early on. His stats were very similar. And I think if he was allowed to grow and mature amongst these guys, he would have been a great future all-star type player. Will Wagner was being groomed as a first baseman to take that mantle of first base and raked at every level. Single A, double A, triple A, every level. And I feel like this was a lot of potential that you wasted for 3 months of a guy that you're asking to be your 4th or 5th starter who doesn't necessarily eat innings like people wanted an innings eater. When you look at what Yusei Kikuchi's done over the last 4 or 5 starts, he's been lit up by Texas. I mean, it just felt like this was forced. It felt like it was rushed. If you watched Dana Brown's postgame after the trade, his body language looked horrible. When you looked at him, he didn't look like a guy that was excited about the guy he just traded for. For me, all those things screamed like this was a forced move. I had to make a move for the sake of making moves. Twitter's blowing up saying the Astros need to do something. National media saying the Astros need to do something. And this was a forced move. And I feel like the Dodgers only further proved that because you saw how they were able to acquire Jack Flaherty. You saw some other trades that weren't nearly as expensive. Frankie Montas is another name that comes to mind for me, where all of these guys could have been had for substantially less. And if you didn't want to make any moves at all and you were worried about these young guys' arms, Eric Lauer, who has major league experience, is pitching at Sugarland, who's a lefty with similar numbers to Yusei Kikuchi. So for me, I just could not stand this trade.
Well, you know what? You make a good point about Dana Brown's body language, and it makes me wonder, well, was he calling the shots on this trade, or were it the guys that we keep pointing to? Jim Crane, I don't know if Jack Bagwell has any input on pitchers, but yeah, it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
back of the baseball card doesn't look good on Kikuchi. I don't know what they're seeing in Kikuchi. I get it. He's got a good fastball. He's got, he's got some stuff I get, but it's not showing up on the major league level. And if he's a reclamation project, maybe that's something that they feel like, oh, we can flip something or whatever, Stromify him, Brett Stromify him, I guess, if you would.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a quick turnaround, and you're basically getting a guy that's going to get a maximum of 9 or 10 starts before he walks away in free agency. A guy that's basically been a mediocre pitcher at best. Tom just laid out the issue with him coming into the trade, like how bad he's been pitching recently. I mean, I get it. Will Wagner and Joey Loperfido, not exactly considered top-end prospects. Loperfido's strikeouts, a concern, although very similar to George Springer. If you go back and look at George Springer's first few games in the major leagues and his minor leagues, I looked at his minor league totals, and it was very similar to Loperfido on this, at least on the strikeouts. Outfield, though, one of the easiest positions to find talent. So you go, okay, we can find guys. I can fix that. Dana Brown obviously is very confident in what he can do. Wagner's best position, maybe at second base. He's too small, I think, to be a first baseman. If it's second base, that means that he's going to have to replace Altuve in 6 years. Well, he's 26. He's going to be like 53 before he replaces Altuve. However, it doesn't mean you just give him away if he can hit. And one of the things that I loved about Will Wagner is he was a classic, modern day Astro in that he didn't strike out and he walked a lot. And then you're also giving up. I don't know if Jake Bloss is going to ever turn into a top 3 guy. It's unlikely. His stuff is not that extraordinary from what I've seen. The strikeout numbers aren't great, but he's club controlled, and he's a young pitcher that's club controlled for 7 years or 6 years or what. It's as opposed to a guy that you've got 2 months who we know is a 4 or 5 pitcher at best. We know that's what this guy is. So, I know you can't run Jake Bloss out there because you're worried about the innings and things like that, but it just feels like, didn't we just trade for Jake Odorizzi? Is that all we just did right now?
Gosh, I hope not.
the one thing that a lot of people are saying, and the one thing that Dana Brown said in his post game was that he felt like, you say, he had some positive regression coming, and his advanced metrics look very good. Like, he's incredibly unlucky right now. And while you can bank on that if you want to, I'd rather have a known quantity. I'd rather not say, well, it's eventually going to find its level. And then the other thing that I think is just like super important to me is, if I'm going to pay all this equity, if I'm going to pay all this draft capital, these young prospects, this guy's got to be able to pitch a postseason game. If we were going to start a postseason series tomorrow, the Astros are not pitching Yusei Kikuchi in that series.
Yeah, that's another thing I was thinking about when you look at the starting rotation going into the postseason. If Verlander is healthy and Garcia is healthy, I would assume both of those guys would start. Verlander is going to start ahead of Kikuchi. Right. I would assume Garcia is. We know for sure Fromber, Hunter Brown, the way he's pitching is definitely, he is not starting in the postseason, Stephen. There's no way.
No, but I Bleav he has pitched in the bullpen previously, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I guess they figure is,
he could slot in there if, especially to get in the postseason, right?
Yeah, big lefty arm in the bullpen. I guess that's what they're figuring. And it's really, it's really amazing to me that, it feels like it was kind of an all-in move for not a guy that this wasn't Randy Johnson. Remember, wasn't it like 3 guys that they traded for Randy Johnson, Stephen? And we were like, oh, that's no big deal. It's a 2-month rental, but it's Randy frickin' Johnson. So I don't even know. Was it 2 months? It might have even been 1 month.
Yeah, it was about maybe less than 2 months. And unfortunately, it didn't pan out in the postseason, but we had some offensive woes to talk about there.
I thought it was like 5 guys too. I thought it was huge. There was like 3 studs out of that deal. Yeah.
There was, John Halama? There was a second baseman. Why am I blanking on the names?
It was 98?
It's been a while.
It's been a minute.
I've slept a few times since then. The Astros also, I'm going to get to the other trade in a second, but they also, with Loperfido leaving, they finally called up Pedro Leon. Biggest positive between Leon and Loperfido is the K rate. Leon's vastly improved this year, averaging only about 1 strikeout in 4 plate appearances. That's a plus. His on base, 377, but sort of helped by the 12 times he's gotten hit by a pitch, which is a ton for a 5'9" guy. That's not happening with big league pitching, though, Stephen. We're not going to see him get hit by a pitch. So, there's some things that he might be able to do a little bit better than Loperfido. Defensively, though, I would guess that Loperfido is a hell of a lot better.
Certainly has proven that even at the major league level. So we'll have to see what Leon is made of there. But, we've been kind of waiting for Leon to come up and see what he can do. He's certainly, he's been raking it this year in Sugar Land, but, the question now is, can he do it at the major league level? And Tom, you mentioned Eric Lauer. I mean, I've been waiting for them to call up Eric Lauer since not long after they signed him. So, we may see him before the season's over.
And I think they should. I think you're going to run into innings limits with Ronel Blanco. You're going to run into innings limits with Hunter Brown, Spencer Aghetti. These three guys have never seen this kind of workload. So it's really, really important that the Astros protect these young arms and spread the wealth. But for me, I just feel like if they're all in on Pedro Leon now, why didn't they make more moves to like Chas McCormick? What are you doing there? Mauricio Dubon, what are you doing there? I know Dubon's got the super utility thing going on, but if we want to give Leon a fair shot, I think you got to find at bats for him. And I don't know that down the stretch, you're going to want to run him in there the same way you felt like the defensive replacement of Joey Loperfido would help you. You valued his glove. I don't think you're going to value Leon's bat over some of these other guys' glove.
Well, let me throw this out at you, Tom. So Loperfido was a lefty. Trey Cabbage is a lefty. Those guys have been facing righties. So when you throw in a lefty, they put Dubon out some of the time in the outfield. Now, maybe Dubon can play more first base, which is what I've been touting when John Singleton is going up against lefties. Because you look at John Singleton's career this year, whatever, he's just nowhere as close against lefties.
100%. If that's the platoon option, then I love it because that frees up a spot in the outfield. Right now, when you think about when Tucker comes back, you're just going to not have anywhere for him to play. And you never felt like Joey was going to play once Tucker came back. So while I do want to see Leon get this shot, I feel like it's the worst possible time for him to come up.
The Astros traded for Yankees lefty reliever Caleb Ferguson as well. As stats underwhelming this year. Also, just like Kikuchi, 5.13 ERA, 1.50 whip this year, 3.66 ERA, 1.37 whip in his career. So definitely just having an off year so far. He must be dominant against lefties, right? Well, this year, 639 OPS against. Great. 709 for his career, but 639 this year. So which guy are we getting for which, Caleb Ferguson? That's the question mark.
I guess when you think about who they gave up for him, at least they certainly didn't sell the farm for him. What's his name? Kelly Austin, an A pitcher, is who the Astros gave up for him. So at least with that deal, you didn't give up somebody that was really highly touted. So if he can at least give some relief in the bullpen, then, maybe that's not a bad deal.
Yeah, the market this year, more than anything I've seen in recent years, was so incredibly high. People were just determined to sell at uncompetitive prices. So you saw some huge prospects go from one team to the other team for guys that it just didn't make a lot of sense. And I feel like in some ways the Astros might have set that market a little bit because of how much they gave up and how it was perceived across Major League Baseball as a huge overpay. And then everybody used that as a starting point. So with this trade for Ferguson, I didn't hate it, but at the same time, when you saw Yankees fans like applaud that they got anything for this guy for as bad as he's been for them, hopefully this is something where a change of scenery helps. Not the pinstripes are not made for everybody. And we've seen it time and time again where as soon as that guy comes out of New York, he shines.
And I think a lot of it was dictated, as you said, by the market. And that, I know that doesn't mean you always have to go with where the market is, but that's kind of where it's been this year. So I think it just depends from trade deadline to trade deadline.
Yeah, let me punctuate it with this, Tom, and see what you think. This is the way it is going to be going forward because when you add these playoff teams, all of a sudden it is a seller's market every year because there are more teams that feel like they're in the race and they've got a shot, less teams that are going to be selling. So advantage sellers going forward, I think.
I totally agree. You're going to find where there's just not as many trade partners to dance with. So everybody's going to have an offer and they're going to be able to sit and wait for the best possible offer. And in order to get to the front of the line, you're just going to have to be willing to overpay and overpay and overpay. It benefits teams that are able to say, we don't have to make that move. You look at some teams where they just were like, look, we're going to stand pat. I think the Minnesota Twins, for whatever reason, was a good example. They did not force anything. I think they made a couple moves late, but I think they didn't hurt their future by mortgaging it to try to make one more playoff win somewhere.
Steven, Justin Verlander and Luis Garcia are going to pitch on a mound That is supposed to be exciting news. But to me, I look at the date on my calendar. It says July 30th today, correct? So that means they're going to be ready when? Like next
I think
March
next week they'll be trotting them both out next week. You know that. No, seriously, my whole thing with that is I want to see what happens the next day. That is a crucial point. We've seen this happen over and over. Is though, they look great today. They pitched to batters. Justin Verlander actually pitched to live batters on a mound today, as we're recording this on Tuesday, the trade deadline day. But it's the next day that you got to wait and see what happens. So yeah, until I find out that they have actually gone to a rehab assignment and they pitched well and they come back, you have to kind of sit and wait around for this kind of thing.
It's frustrating, and I'm tired of talking about guys that aren't playing for the Astros and when they're actually, hey, he's throwing underhand to his 3-year-old. Let's get up and excited for it. I mean, come on. Hey, I wanted to throw out one last thing before we close things out. If you watch the Olympic gymnastics the last 4 days, it was everything I love about sports. Listen to some of the storylines. Our best men's gymnast, Brody Malone, blew out his leg a year ago on a high bar dismount, needed 3 surgeries, had to learn how to walk again. He leads Team USA to its first gymnastics men's medal in 16 years. He got a ton of help from Tomball's own Asher Hong and a guy who looked like he was central casting for the classic 1980s film Revenge of the Nerds. You old school people know what I'm talking about. I mean, Steven Nedorosik. Yeah. That guy sat around for like 2.5 hours and then had to nail the pommel horse like he was Adam Vinatieri at the Super Bowl, who hadn't played in the game until that point. He was the last guy on the last event, Steven. It was unreal.
Yeah, I was unreal. And you know what was really cool, Robert, is as a journalist, you always look for the guys that you've interviewed before. And I've had the good fortune to interview both Asher Hong and Steven Nedorosik. Now, it was several years ago. These guys were still, on their Olympic journey. And so it sent chills up my spine when I saw what they both did. And the fact that the U.S. men's team, that's the first medal they've had in 16 years. And those 3 guys did it. Asher Hong, you mentioned he was Houston area. He trains in Tomball. And unless you've read my story, Robert, you'll never guess in a million years who his inspiration is for his success in the gym. It's Spider-Man. Yeah, Tobey Maguire, that's Spider-Man. Spider-Man, no, he's a real big Spider-Man fan, and I kind of joked with him about it when I talked to him. But Steven Nedorosik, there's a guy who he says that one of the keys to his success is that you have to say it out loud in order to believe it. You believe you can win in your mind, but you have to say it out loud. Those are 2 really interesting tidbits that I got from interviewing those guys. And now to watch them help the U.S. men's team, it was incredible.
Yeah, Spidey always lands on his feet, Tom. That's the one thing about Spidey.
I really hate that I missed it. I heard all about it. I read about it, obviously keeping up with the trade deadline stuff, and then, kind of got busy at work. But an amazing story. You really feel like the Olympics kind of brings people together a little bit. Obviously I'm not gymnast, or I don't know anything about, that, but I love watching it. So for me, I get excited just rooting for these guys and not necessarily knowing what the terminology is, what they just did, what I just saw, like how good or how bad, it's always fun.
The guys' storyline seems even more improbable than the women, but even though they had 2 Olympic all-around gold medalists, let's remember Simone Biles got the twisties during the last Olympics, then screwed up her calf after the first event qualifier Sunday. She got through the last 3 events on a leg and a half back in the qualifiers. And 1 year ago, Suni Lee got a kidney infection. She couldn't hold on to the bar, fit her fingers into the grips, and then she gained 45 pounds in 2 weeks. She had to immediately quit Auburn's gymnastics team, and doctors told her, hey, you might never compete again. Today, Natalie Portman, Michael Phelps, Nicole Kidman, and Serena Williams watch Simone and Suni, Steven, just dominate the field.
Man, that's one of the things I love about the Olympics, Robert, is just the adversity that these men and women have to go through. And even ones like Simone Biles, can we stop being surprised at anything Simone does? Well, no, because every year, it seems, she comes up with something different. And this year is no different because she just overcomes injuries. The mental health thing a few years ago, we know all about that. That's what the Olympics are made of, are the stories of the journey of how you get there. And then when you get there, despite what you have against you, you take a deep breath and you go for it. Man, that it's just incredible on both sides, the men's and the women's.
Yeah, and Simone, if you can't figure it out by now, it's my favorite athlete to watch these days. She's Tiger Woods, she's Michael Jordan, she's Babe Ruth,
she's the Houston Sports Talk bump.
Yeah,
That's what she is.
She's the Houston Sports Talk bump, and Steven just set me up perfectly because, she's 27 years old right now. 9 years ago, when she was 18, we got an exclusive with Simone at her gym in Spring, Texas. Here's a couple of minutes from that conversation. Keep in mind, this is before any Olympics gold medals, before some of the stuff that she's had to overcome. It was 9 years ago. Here you go.
When I was 7 years old, I started in gymnastics, and for about 3 years, I was doing some competitive gymnastics just statewide. But one of the things is it got tiring, it got exhausting, the commitment got more and more. How do you handle that? How did it not get that for you?
It took a lot of self-discipline, and I always have like my coaches or my family as a great support system to go to if I'm ever feeling stressed. So we've kind of dealt with it really well with balancing the two.
This is something that you've loved since how old were you when you started doing this?
I was 6 years old.
It took a while before you really got serious. It was just within the last few years, right?
Yes, it took a while to notice that I had the ability to do what I do now, and it just took a while for me to realize that and to actually take it in and use it.
Who were the gymnasts that you looked to when you grew up? Who was it that kind of captured your imagination? And who have you talked to that, has really helped you of maybe the champions that you've met?
I used to look up to Alicia Sacramone and Shawn Johnson and Nastia Lukin, but then growing up or helping me or mentoring me, it's always been Kyla my past couple of years. But I've always, if I have any problems, I can go to Michaela, Kyler, Allie, and they can tell me what's up and stuff like that. So they've always guided me into the right direction.
I heard Mary Lou Retton called you the most talented gymnast that she's ever seen. What does it mean when you hear something like that?
It's almost crazy because she's been in these same footsteps and gone on to do way better things. So to hear her say that, it's just amazing, and it still blows my mind because I'm like, wow, but look at you. Your name is Mary Lou Retton, and that's who you are, and you live up to it. So I think it's just kind of crazy that she could say that about me, and it's an honor.
Some people know your biography, but for those who don't, you were born in Ohio. Your biological mom had some problems, and she had to give up her kids into foster care. Luckily, you were adopted by your grandparents, and that's your mom and dad right now. But the thing that amazes me and the thing that I think about is you came to Houston, Texas, of all places. And this is this is a gymnastics hotbed. Do you feel like that kind of changed your life a little bit? Were you very fortunate to be here of all places to kind of have landed in Houston?
Yes, I am very fortunate to have landed in Houston, Texas, just because Texas has a lot of amazing gyms in the area. So just to have landed here and me being able to stay here and not have to move like some other gymnasts have, I think it's a blessing.
Oh my goodness. It's so amazing to listen back to that because that was before she knew like how this whole thing was going to play out. And, if you don't know this story, I alluded to it. Her mom had drug issues. That's how she ends up in Houston. So her life has been like a storybook. It's been out of, you look at, we forget, maybe some people forget about the sexual assault from her own team, with Larry Nassar and what happened with that. It's just unreal.
It is. And, Robert, first of all, I want to see if you can still do the pommel horse. That's what I want to know. Can you still get up there? And
I hated that. And you have no idea how you actually have to do that. It's actually what was probably in my top 2 least favorite events.
Yeah, it is a hard, I wouldn't want to do it. I'll tell you that right now. Yeah.
Rings is easier than it looks. Pommel horse was harder. And I remember when I was doing it, I was 7 years old and I basically came up to, Weeble wobble height or something like that.
Yeah.
And Tom, if you don't know this story, when I started at 7 years old, I started with 3 kids at a brand new gym. It's called Bill Austin's Gymnastics. The guy that I started off with, or one of the guys that I started off with at age 7, and I was doing competitive stuff. I went to Austin and Dallas and San Antonio for events, and then I was a quitter because I quit at the age of 10 years old. But the guy that one of the guys I started with, ended up as an alternate on the Atlanta Olympic team back in '96. And he kept going, went on to Stanford. There's some Stanford guys, of course, with a lot of success on this current team, but he went on to Stanford, was the team captain there, won the national championship. So I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody, as Brando used to say.
I think things turned out pretty well for you, Robert.
Yeah, well, it's okay. I mean, the Olympics would have been nice, though. It would have been, outside of that little bombing incident in '96, it would have been. Hey, the Kerry Strug thing, the anniversary of that was just a few days ago, and that one of the great moments in gymnastics history. I assume my guy was there when that happened.
I remember watching that with my daughter, and she had an interest in gymnastics, not competitively, but I remember I turned to her and I said, it takes a lot of grit to do what she did. My daughter was probably about 7 or so when that happened.
Remember, John Lopez wrote the Kerry Strug biography.
That's right. He did.
Yeah. Real good stuff from Lopez. I read his Pastorini biography, which was fantastic. He's a really, really good writer. I mean, we forget that because he's on the radio all the time now, Tom.
I remember that book too.
Yeah. He's actually a great writer.
I don't know him, the writer. I only know him, the radio guy. So I definitely got to go and read some stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
he used to be with the Chronicle, right?
Yeah, it's forgotten. Yeah, he was a great I think a lot of people forget that was part of his career. Didn't get a chance to, as you say, witness it. But man, can't look forward to the Texans enough. I can't wait to see Davis Mills firing balls 4 feet over Stephon Diggs' head. It should be fun.
I feel better about Davis than I think you do. He's so good in practice. I think him and Mechie could have a really big night. I really hope that those guys, they've been doing it in training camp. I hope they do it under the bright lights and on the TV for everybody to see. And people go, these white uniforms look really good, but the Texans look really good too.
Well, I will see you on Thursday, Tom, Steven. I'll see you next week. Thanks, guys, for doing this, and looking forward to Texans football and some new Astros hitting the mound in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, looking forward to hearing your comments on all the postgame shows.
Thanks, Steve. I'm looking forward to being here. So happy y'all brought me on. I really appreciate it. It's going to be a great season.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.